Alpha Pickleball Podcast, where we slice through the noise to bring you the juiciest insights, strategies, and stories from the dynamic world of pickleball. Join us as we serve up engaging conversations with top players, coaches, and enthusiasts, giving you an ace perspective on all things pickleball. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just stepping onto the court, get ready for a volley of knowledge that'll elevate your game to alpha levels. Let the rallies begin.
All right, welcome again to the show. I'm your host, TATS, and we have Wes Gabrielsen here, pro pickleball player. So I'm excited to dig in. Wes, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, so you have an extensive background in pickleball. How did it start for you?
Well, actually, it was about 1998, long before a lot of people got into the sport. Lucky enough to grow up here in the Pacific Northwest in the state of Oregon. And as a lot of people know, the sport was created about 4 hours north of where I live in Seattle. And so we were lucky enough to have pickleball in the schools when I was growing up. So I was introduced at age 12 with a wooden paddle and a Duraball on a gym floor. So you can imagine the points weren't very long. A lot of quick points. One thing I found interesting was, I'm ambidextrous, so I like to switch hands when I play. But the wooden paddles have a string around the bottom, and the teachers required us to put the string around our wrists so that the paddles wouldn't fly and hit each other. So I was a little bit frustrated. I couldn't switch, but I learned how to deal with it. And then I just was lucky enough to play through middle school, high school, college. We had PE classes.
Yeah.
And then really it was a couple years after college that a tennis friend of mine reintroduced me to pickleball and showed me the competitive side and what dinking was. And that really got me going.
Yeah. So when were you allowed to take the string off?
Well, I got in trouble a few times because I didn't put the string on, let's just say.
So, early days, were you using both hands, playing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I was. I just, I've always been pretty ambidextrous. I came from a strong baseball and soccer background, which I did more right-handed, right-footed. But then all of my daily functions of eating and writing are all lefty. So it was kind of natural for me to go back and forth.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. And sort of for you, starting so early, there's not the same amount of videos and stuff available. How did your development of skill happen?
Well, I was lucky enough to come from a solid tennis background that gave me a foundation, and I thank all of my tennis coaches from my youth and college, of course. But I was lucky enough to meet a legend of the game, Steve Peranto, who lives about 45 minutes from me, and he really, took me under his wing, and I played my first year of open pickleball with him as my partner, and was lucky enough to play with him in several tournaments as a lefty, mostly in pickleball, which is what I play. I don't know if people know this, but he and his longtime partner, Randy Byther, were the first team to ever stack. And so he was revolutionary with stacking and told me why it was okay for me to be on the right side of the court the whole time and how that worked. And I'm super grateful for him in my early days, for his friendship, for his coaching, for his guidance. And, without him, I definitely wouldn't have had the career I've had.
Wow. So, early development, were you drilling a lot? How was your time spent to try to improve? Playing a lot? What was the focus?
Well, in my background in sports, I love to, I never really played a lot of basketball, but I was kind of a gym rat in terms of that sense. So I was a person who wanted to drill all the time in tennis. And so that carried over into pickleball. And I remember my first nationals, I think it was 2013 in the States. And I showed up and I met some of my partners who were arranged for me because that was my first time or second time out of state playing. And I asked him, "Hey, do you want to do some drills?" And everyone kind of looked at me, said, "This is weird. We just play rec. What do you mean?" I said, why don't you want to drill? I'm sure you do. So I definitely drilled a lot with Steve. And then as I met other players like Enrique Ruiz and Christine Barksdale and others in the area, we all would play and drill more often. But Steve used to frustrate me so much, and I'm so thankful for him, because when I did play singles, I played singles for about 3 years, and I was beating Steve in singles pretty regularly. And he said, "I got an idea. When you come over to my home," which he had a court in his backyard, "I've got this drill that we're going to do, and it's going to frustrate the hell out of you, but it's going to make you better." He shrunk the court on his side.
Oh no.
So he could hit to the full court on my side, but I could only hit within the lines. And he beat me like 5 games in a row, but I had to get creative within a small space. So Steve's an innovator, and a mentor for a lot of us.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, you mentioned that you primarily play with your left hand on the right side. Were you using your other hand at all in any way?
Yeah, so I serve right-handed, and then I play out most of the point left. When I used to play singles, I would hit 2 forehands. So if I got stretched out wide, gave me a little bit more reach. And then from time to time, if I get lobbed, I will switch to my right hand to hit an overhead. I
Yeah.
still do that because it's more like that throwing motion
Yeah.
for me in baseball.
And what's your rationale around, serving with one hand and then playing with the other?
I get that question a lot. It's kind of funky. When I spent a lot of years coaching tennis and teaching tennis, I would feed right-handed, which was just more of a natural motion. I hit all lefty forehands in tennis, but I can't feed with my left hand to save my life. It's very bizarre. So when I switched to pickleball, the natural serving motion was using my right hand,
Mm,
because it is very similar to feeding a tennis ball when you think about it.
got it. Um, I mean, I'm lefty. Tell me about
Mhm.
the lefty B on the right. What are the responsibilities? What do you know about that position?
Well, I feel like more and more these days we see in at the pro level, especially, people trying to become a right side specialist. I think we've seen a lot of top pros who are excellent on the left working on being a stronger on the right. So I guess you and I and lefties have that built in, that we're in our natural habitat on the right. Um, I think there's something about lefties in every sport, especially racket sports, that are kind of seen as crafty. Doesn't mean we can't hit hard, but I think, our brain works maybe a little bit differently. We're wired a little differently, that we've accepted this role in pickleball. And
Oh, it's just freezing out just a little bit. Oh, hello, Wes. Hello?
sorry,
All right. No, it just froze for a second. It's okay. I'll just note that. But
I figured you got editing
Yeah.
prowess.
So we were talking about lefty on the right, and the lefty accepting the role, and then you're walking into that.
You want me to just start in?
Yeah, absolutely. So that the
Yeah, I
lefty
think
role.
yeah, I think lefty's just kind of accepting that role of being that setup person. It doesn't mean we can't be offensive, but when I look at men's doubles specifically, in my recent career, I tend to play with people that are about 6'4" or 6'5", and I feel small at 6 feet myself, and so I embrace that role of being that builder.
Yeah. So what sort
Whereas
of
in mixed
things?
doubles,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
more aggressive.
sure. So the builder role, what does that look like? I mean, dinking down the line, to the background on the from the right to the middle. What sort of things you see as building the position?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the weaknesses of opponents and also your partner's strengths. I played for a number of years with Eric Lang, who's tall, moves well, has a lot of power. I used a variety of dinking locations to try to move our opponents, open up the court, which gave him time to move in and be aggressive. So that doesn't necessarily mean that, we're going specifically to one spot. It may be dinking to the inside foot a couple of times cross court, then going behind the player in front of you, depending on how aggressive they are.
Yeah, for sure. Um, what do you see? Because you've seen through the transition for the games over the years. What was happening before, and what do you see happening now?
The biggest thing that I get when I teach clinics, the biggest question I get is, from players, do I really need to dink because the game has sped up so much? And I said, well, paddle technology has provided that. More athleticism has provided that at the pro level. I'm coaching a few pros when I coach MLP, and then locally there's some 5-0s that are trying to go pro that I'm working with. But a majority of people that receive instruction in this sport are the 3-0 to 3-5 level, and dinking is still how you control the pace of play and resetting. And it doesn't matter if you're Ben Johns, Tyson McGuffin, Annalie Waters, or you're a 3-0, 3-5. You have to dink and you have to reset. So trend wise, I guess what I've seen is the pace of dink speed up, the amount of spin increase. There's more driving of the ball based on paddle technology, again, at the pro level. At the amateur level, I think ball control still wins matches.
Yeah. So these 5-0s that you're working with, trying to, get their shot at pro, what are you telling them? What are you working on with?
A lot of it is mindset, and a lot of it is getting a little more variety in their games, whether that's, disguising speed ups, implementing some lobs, driving with a little more dip versus just a flat hard ball, working on reaction time. Those are just a few items um, that I work on with folks, and every player is different, right? Everyone has a different skill set.
Yeah. So what do you feel when you play is your skill set?
I feel like experience leads to a solid court IQ. I feel like I adapt well to different opponents and can come up with game plans that cater to the skill set of my partner and myself. In men's doubles, I feel like consistent dinking with variety and playing with a lot of funk is it's a little bit different than a lot of people use at the pro level. I think also the fact that I don't play as many pro tournaments anymore can help me sometimes because I'm always working on new stuff that people haven't seen. A lot of players get used to it quickly, but it might win me a few points. And then I think in mixed doubles, just minimizing court for opponents to hit to by my movement, it would be a strength.
Yeah. I mean, is there any consideration, being lefty, playing mix, partner selection, angles, anything? Any considerations there?
Yeah, definitely. I tend to play mixed with a lot of partners that are very comfortable on the left. because I think in pro mixed, a lot of the women typically play on the right because they play with a left hand, or excuse me, a strong right-handed player who loves being on the left. So, recently in the last couple of years, I've played a lot of open pro events with players like Susanna Barr, Bobby Oshiro, who are much more comfortable on the left. Doesn't mean they can't play on the right. They're fantastic anywhere they go, but they may play on that left side a bit more in women's doubles. And so they like that opportunity to get to play on that side a little bit more in mixed.
Yeah. And I guess for the ladies, is comfortable dinking forward, good cross-court dink, stuff like that.
Yeah, and it depends, right? Because if you're playing like a rally scoring format, or you're playing, a regular format and you're playing straight up, typically that female partner of mine in mixed will be straight ahead from the woman. Whereas in a lot of cases, they're dinking cross court. And so, one thing I love about when I've played with Bobby in a couple of tournaments is she's got this really killer dink in defense, but she's got this really aggressive flick into the body from her backhand that she can hit well when she's on the left side of the court.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that you recently went to Australia to play
I did.
MLP. Tell me about that.
It was a great trip. It was at this point in my career, I love playing pro in the States, but I'm not going to be a weekend warrior anymore, and that's by choice. And it's not to say I don't love competing, but I look at really fun opportunities that are there, and very thankful to MLP Australia for, in their second year, allowing internationals to be part of the draft. And my thought was, well, I get to see a different part of the world. I get to make some connections for future endeavors. I get to play in another continent with a ton of people who are pros in a different part of the world. And was lucky enough to get picked by a team out of Asia, the Asia Aces, and had a great time. We went 0-2 in our team matches, but I think we lost most of our individual matches 21-19. So it's about as close as you can get. And I had a blast competing with and meeting a whole group of people that are looking to take their game to the next level. And I will tell everyone out there, there is a lot of athleticism and potential and talent in that Australian top tier of players. I was so impressed with, and Aussies are known for their great double skills in tennis. So it does not surprise me one bit that there's this untapped kind of pocket of players that the U.S. has never seen. And I sure hope some of these folks come across the pond and play, because I think it'd be fun to see how they do.
Absolutely. And when you play like an MLP, I'm assuming it's the same rally scoring format.
You're correct. Yeah.
Do you play differently?
So the mindset's a bit different, right? When I played MLP in the States in 2022, MLP was in its second year. And so we were definitely, I think, a little more conservative with taking a ton of chances. It didn't mean we weren't going to be aggressive at the net, but I tend to see fewer players drive as much from the baseline. Players tend to drop a bit more, just because if you miss 3 or 4 drives, that's 3 or 4 out of 21 points that you're giving away. So I tend to play a little bit. I drop a little bit more than driving, and then I'm not going to speed up as many balls. We also played on pickle roll over there, and so the ball doesn't bounce as high as a typical court, I found. It was also 103 degrees the first day we played, so the ball really wasn't moving at all. I think players were a bit more conservative to save their energy. And then the next day it rained and it was 70. So you saw a little more traditional pickleball attacking being played.
Oh, adaptability.
Yeah.
Do you have a different mindset, play style, if you are serving versus receiving in regular pickleball?
In regular scoring?
Yeah, regular score.
I mean, I think we all want to win the point regardless. But yeah, I think with serving, I know what's unique about pickleball is people have really moved towards weaponizing the serve with pace and spin. You're getting a few more pop-ups that you can drive, your thirds, you can drive a bit more. But I feel what's unique about pickleball is the serving team still, I think, kind of has the disadvantage because they have to let that ball come back and bounce. So when I'm serving, I tend to focus on placement more. And, a good deep serve creates maybe a shorter return that you can then choose your spots with in a little less stressed fashion. Whereas returning, I just want to keep, I tend to be a little more aggressive, I would say,
Oh,
trying to
really?
hit deeper with more spin.
Okay. Very, very cool. Yeah, I think what you talked about future. What are you looking at for the future? What's your vision?
For my game or
Your
in
game,
general?
what you're gonna end up doing, what's your vision?
Yeah, I think, I'm kind of in a unique spot where I have one foot in the playing side of things as a pro and then one foot in the coaching. And I think I just heard this morning that luckily I think the merger has happened in the United States finally. So looking forward to getting to work with the Austin Pickleballers again and coaching that team. I think long term, that's as long as MLP thrives, that's going to be my side of things long term. I'll never stop competing. Of course, I'd love to compete, but the coaching side and working more with the pros and the upcoming pros is something I'd love to do. Additionally, I enjoy teaching clinics in different parts of the country, so I definitely want to do that and overseas. But I'm 38 and I've got a couple more years to make a crack at having some good runs in the States. So I would say I've kind of 50-50 still with the coaching and playing in the near future.
Absolutely. When you are, I guess, coaching an MLP team, I guess you mentioned, um, what is your role? What is your objective? How do you involve yourself in the team?
Yeah, so it's part-time strategist, part-time mentor, part-time cheerleader, uh, and part-time a game manager, right? So, last season I was lucky enough to coach two different incarnations of the team because we had a premier team the first half and then we flip-flopped to challenger. And so I was brought in to coach Austin after they played one event already. And so my job at that point was fostering team chemistry, bringing energy, and game planning, right? Because I had J.W. Johnson and Gabe Tardio and the Kawamoto twins, who are all stellar, phenomenal players. Most of the work with them was game planning, strategizing beforehand, who we're returning to, who we're dropping to, and then the day of reinforcing, or calling a timeout and making a strategy adjustment. The second half of the season, I had the team for two events. The last one got canceled. So it was more of the starting point of doing a training camp, building that team up, working with the players from the get-go.
Yeah,
So lot of different hats you wear in that role.
yeah. And what does a pickleball sort of training camp look like in your point of view?
Well, we did one actually before the Dallas event, and so we did a 2-day training camp, and I had the first day I had 1 hour one-on-one with each of the players, working on just a few technical things and strategy um, discussions and adjustments. And then when I was done with that player, they would go to the court next to us and play doubles games continuously where they got to implement those strategies. So getting a little one-on-one and then going in the lab and trying to figure out what's the good experiment that works and what's failed. And then I think in the afternoon and then the next day we did more scrimmaging where I had the gender teams play each other. We had mixed combinations. So it was a 2-day event and I hope to do more of those this season.
And I guess, some of those players have not played together, right? So I guess that's where that learning occurs.
Yeah, fostering that chemistry. I mean, we were blessed in the second half of MLP to have, four great players. We had Tammy Emmerich and Milan Rain. And then kind of a cool advantage we had was we had Daniel De La Rosa and Ben Newell, who play together on the tour all the time. So we didn't need to necessarily foster that chemistry. It was more of taking what they had and helping to add some new strategies to help them be successful.
Yeah. And what sort of things that fostered chemistry? Like, is it team dinners? Like, what sort of things that work for you?
Yeah, well, team dinners are excellent, and our ownership group and our director of operations do all the groundwork to get all that stuff set up. I actually couldn't be at the first training camp, but what our team did before Atlanta is the ownership group rented a house, and the players stayed there for a weekend
Ah,
and got to know each other more. And the team chemistry was off the charts good for that team from the jump. I mean, it was amazing. Um,
wow.
but we had three very outgoing personalities, and so there was no hesitation to get that maybe shyer person to come out of her shell as well. And it was really fun to see that.
Awesome. Great. Is there anything I didn't ask you, but you want to share?
Not really. I just think, players, coaches, we appreciate you and others that, do podcasts to shed light on the sport. And I really appreciate those that focus on issues that aren't necessarily just the week in and week out results and chaos. It's nice to see behind the scenes. And no, I mean, I know that's interesting for folks, but there's a lot out there that do that and do it well. And then there's others like yourself and others who are looking at more of those stories and analysis and strategies. So I think it's great. So thank you for doing what you do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Alpha Pickleball Podcast with TATS. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe, rate, and connect with us on social media. Stay alpha on the pickleball court. Until our next session.